Hi, I'm Kathleen Murf+E, and welcome to Murf+E Unfiltered Zero BS Biz Talk. I'm here today with my co-host, Tom Macomber. How are you, Tom?
Very well, Kathy. Great to be here. Thank you.
I'm so glad that you could be here, filling in for Elliot.
Yes, absolutely. Glad to do it.
Big shoes to fill,
Big shoes
but
to fill.
you guys, extremely comparable in many,
Thank you.
many very good ways.
Thank you very much.
Yes, you're very welcome. So today, the title of the show is Inspiring Others, Do You? And I particularly happen to like this topic because it's in alignment with the type of work that I am doing and have been doing for a number of years now. And the overview of this particular show is, what if your job was to inspire others? Could you handle this? Where would you begin? And what would be something that you would do to inspire others? So early in my career, I wasn't in a position where I felt like I was inspiring others. I don't believe probably most people are generally in that situation. If they are, they're very fortunate. But it took me a long time to get to this place. And it took me a lot of sort of soul searching and appreciation for what my particular talents were and where I was lighting myself up in terms of what really sparked my interest during the course of when I was going through my marketing career, which I was in for 20 plus years.
Right.
And I made a decision to pivot about 4 years ago to decide to do something slightly different, which was to work with people to bring the best out in them and to essentially mentor them, to serve as either a in-person or virtual mentor for them through the writing that I do and shows like this.
Sure.
And it's just been incredibly fun to get to this point. And so I encourage people that even if they have a sense that someday this is something that they might like to do, I tell them, please go for it. Please absolutely do that. When people are typically selecting their career, they're generally doing so based out of it being a practical career choice. Now, when I chose the career choice originally of going into marketing, I knew that that was both practical, but I also knew it was going to be interesting to me because it is a creative-oriented profession, and I knew that I had a creative bent, so that worked well for me.
Right.
I throw a caution flag out there for people to be really mindful of that, but to also don't dismiss if you have any inklings of things that you feel that you're strong at doing where people have said, don't bother, don't pursue that. Try not to listen to those people because generally they're well-meaning and have great intentions, but oftentimes the advice is ill given. And I'm sure you've probably experienced that.
I would agree completely. I would say that oftentimes I don't know that it's coming from the most positive place, and I think that's the thing you need to be aware of, right? There's always the need, the willingness to take on feedback from different sources.
Yes.
So you're getting a palette of color there.
I like that.
But at the end of the day, you need to be the one that makes that decision on how to pivot and how to move forward. My daughter right now is 17, and she's considering college and what to do. And of course, I think we all remember at that time, it's very difficult to feel inspired because you feel like you're just going to make decisions really rapidly.
And it's so stressful with all those decisions.
Yeah, and I often tell her, I think I've even told her your story and just said that don't worry so much because you'll find your way to where you need to be eventually, right?
Ultimately, you will. And did you ever think that you would potentially be in a career position where you'd be inspiring people? I love the fact that you're on Clubhouse, very actively on there, engaging with people on a regular basis.
That's been a great experience.
And I think, I don't know if I can take credit for this, but I may have been one of the people that had suggested Clubhouse to you.
You invited me to it, yes.
I invited you, there we go.
You're the reason I'm there. I'd never heard of it. And it's pivoted into these fantastic inspirational conversations with people from all over the globe. I share music out there, we share poetry, we talk about leadership. I'm in a room 3 nights a week talking about leadership principles and helping people just see that there's another way to consider the dilemmas that they face in life.
Speaking of that, we all face setbacks. We all face situations where we may not want to be in that particular scenario, and we think to ourselves, oh my gosh, what did I do to get here? okay, maybe I should have gone left instead. But
Yeah.
sometimes we're completely blind to understanding and having an appreciation for maybe a path that we went down where we're now not satisfied. Were you ever in a situation like that? And if so, how did you handle the
Right.
situation? What did you do?
So I spent about 30 years in corporate America, most of that in an IT role, and I had no intention ever to be in IT. It was a complete mistake. I fell into it. Somebody left a role and they said, we think you'd be good at it, and so I tried it, and there I was.
There was that advice, that sort of...
Yeah, and I
maybe-
followed it, but I will say, as much as it's been, there's been a great deal of success there, I don't know that it led as much to what I think or what I thought I would do. As a child, I grew up with relatively few means. We were 11 people, 9 kids in a 3-bedroom house. 6 boys, 1 room. We had 1 bathroom and 1 phone. But it was my great-grandfather's house that we owned. And then, but the beauty of it was, it just so happened that small little house with all those people in it was next to an 89-acre park.
Oh my gosh.
So that was my backyard. And I can remember as a 6, 7, 8-year-old walking through the park giving inspirational speeches in my head.
In your head.
As if I was, a motivational speaker.
Right.
This was the early 1970s. There were no motivational speakers, so I don't know where I got that from.
I was just going to ask you, where did that come from?
No idea.
Because it wasn't as if, right, you were on YouTube and...
No, I think the closest
heard
thing you
something.
had to it were priests and preachers, right? That was
Right.
pretty much it.
Right. That would be about it, yeah.
But I don't think it always has to do with what you're doing. I think you can inspire wherever you are, and I think that's the goal. So finding what are we seeing right now? A mass exodus.
Yes.
And we're seeing that mass exodus in part because people's values have started to catch up with them.
They have, and interestingly, as part of the work that I do with the leadership coaching that I'm involved with in working with my clients, is I have them establish what their 5 top values are. And those are different than goals, certainly.
Right.
And funny enough, the majority of them will tell me that they've actually never really stopped to take a moment to figure out what they were. They had a sense potentially what they were if they were asked to put them down in writing, but I take them through an exercise where they have to actually pare down from about 100 options to have 5 values that they're going to lock into, and these are my top 5 values. And so I think people are being a lot more mindful these days with this mass exodus, getting to a point where, well, I'm really looking around and thinking, is this it?
Right, exactly.
Even sadly, people in their early 20s that haven't been in the working world all that terribly long are feeling that way. What do you think is leading to that?
Well, I think the last 20 months is certainly a big part of it. And I think the reason for that is not so much the pandemic itself, but suddenly folks found themselves in situations where they were as productive as they had been.
Yes.
And I think it's important to say that's not everybody's experience, right?
No.
There are
Clearly
certainly,
not. No.
and it's not in every industry. There are industries where you're going to have to still be at work.
That's right.
But, and we actually talk about this a lot on Clubhouse, and we bring in small business owners that simply can't have their staff at home.
Right.
But I think what people saw was that there's a part of life that they had been ignoring in favor of somebody else's dream.
I like that. That's, yeah.
And so when they started to analyze that, they said, look, I want to do great. I don't think it's the people who are saying I don't want to work. They're saying I want to work, but what I've realized is I can work and pay attention to these things that are important to me now that I maybe hadn't been paying attention to. And I think they also have seen that life is finite, and it's important to be inspired, but it's also important to know that there's purpose in what you do and how you do it.
Without a doubt. And I think also I've been hearing from a lot of people expressing the fact that they had not, prior to the pandemic, really been all that focused, even though they gave a lot of lip service to having more balance in their life.
Right.
And by going through the experience of being, in a situation that was ultimately quite different than being in the office every day, they were able to strike and find some balance, probably for the first time ever.
Right.
And so that applies to people of many different decades of being in the workforce. I think it was probably the most impactful for those who had been in the workforce, who had not had the opportunity to be at home for the length of time that they had for as long as they had been, which I think is a beautiful outcome and quite inspirational.
It can be. I think I think there's some that don't. I was listening to Susan David being interviewed by Brene Brown.
Oh, I love her.
On Dare to Lead, her podcast. And one of the things she said is they had done a study on the emotions that people think they have. This was Brene saying this to Susan. And it came back that people basically described their entire emotional palette with 3 words.
Is that right?
Just 3.
Just 3.
And Susan's response to that was, how can you stand up for anything if that's all you've got to play with? How can you know what's going to matter to you in the end? How can you be inspired to change or to help change somebody else if it's really just happiness, sadness, and anger? Right?
Without a doubt, that would be like, I was just thinking of the analogy of having 3 crayons to work with when you're a small person, and then trying to create this beautiful picture with
my
just
son would tell
colors.
you the same thing, I'll tell you that. He knows if there's not enough colors in that deck. So.
Right? So, and life is colorful. It should be colorful. And words are part of life. So were there any other patterns that they saw in terms of, were there similar word choices of the 3 words? I'm not trying to put you on the spot here.
No, and I know you're familiar with her work. I think what the takeaway for me is that, and I think this is one of the things I try to have conversations with both staff members and people on Clubhouse and friends, and is sitting with emotions as opposed to trying to offload them. And I think we often think, and this is where toxic positivity comes into all of this, right, is that this idea that you need to pack away the things you're feeling in favor of this positive sense of forwardness.
Right.
I don't think inspiration means positivity necessarily. It certainly can. But you can be inspired by things that are devastating. You can be inspired by
without a doubt
horrific stories. You can be inspired by sad songs. And you can be inspired at parts of your life where it's just not working, and that's the catalyst for you to become something else. And so one of the things that Susan talked about was sitting next to those emotions and seeing them as things that aren't you.
Right.
But they are not just words either, right? They are something that you need to see the sign for what it means.
That's right. That's right.
She sees it as signposts. So if if you watch the news and the news makes you angry, the signpost might be telling you that you care about things in the world.
That's right.
That you have a compassion and an empathy. Right?
Exactly.
So I think that's how you help drive inspiration with people. I know with my staff, when I left my job in April, and the individual private conversations I had with every staff member, the things they said to me, it made the last 18 years worth it. Every one of them said, "You've changed the way I think about my life."
Well, that's incredibly inspiring.
It is.
And it's when you hear those kind of comments, like you said, that it makes it all worthwhile. And I think that a lot of times people don't take ownership for being responsible for their emotions.
Right.
And to your point earlier, they may in fact offload them, bury them, not necessarily confront them. But when they do, even if they're sad or bad or negative, because our emotions aren't all positive, I think those are the times when you just need to be able to look for the small catalyst within that if you need to be inspired, because you may not necessarily as easily be one of those persons that sees inspiration in a lot of different things. You may have to look harder for it than some other people.
Yes, and there's people out there, and I'm sure you know them, that to inspire them is a lifelong journey you'll never get to. Right? I worked with a guy.
Even conversationally.
Yeah, one of my favorite workers. He was unbelievably good at what he did. He was just a lovely person, but he was a flatliner. He was good where he was. He had there was not really an up and a down. There was no valleys, right? So, but I think it's really important that we, and I'm sure you went through this in your decision making, to move away from marketing and into what you do now.
I did, very consciously.
This idea that we strive to climb.
Yes.
Forgetting that once we get there, inevitably there's a peak. I mean, there's a dip, right? You're going to go down to the valley and then back up, and then down to the valley and back up.
That's right.
And so what you're really hoping that inspiration brings you is sustainability.
That's right.
I think one of the problems that we have in life is we don't balance it out.
That's one of the challenges, and I have some tips that I'd like to share
Sure.
with the audience in addition to what you just shared, because that's a critical nugget of advice that people should absolutely pay attention to. The first one is, do you have a particular talent that others may not have, but yet be beneficial in terms of sharing it with others? Perhaps teaching others about a talent you possess. If you do, look for opportunities to share your talent is the first one. A couple others. Have you overcome either a common or less common situation that others can relate to, and perhaps they have not figured out a way to get through it? Maybe divorce, an illness. It may be something happy in terms of they just moved, now what? Now what do I do? The third one is your type of inspiration the type that can be shared with a small or large group of people? Not everyone's type of inspiration catalyst is suited towards a large audience, although it might be. So just taking off from your prior comment, do you want to say a little bit more in terms of striking that balance?
Well, it's funny, all the things you just said there are part of my life. So as a creative, I'm a musician, I'm a singer-songwriter, I'm a poet. And it's absolutely been the catalyst for me. And what I'm finding and learning now later in life for so many others. One of the things I also do in Clubhouse is the open mic nights.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And so I'll be in a room with people from all over the world that will write me. I've been in rooms with Grammy Award winners that said, "Why are you not in LA writing music with me?" That's a great thing to hear.
It is.
But it's also something that you have to have a grounded sense about.
That's right.
And then you take that same experience back to somebody else that maybe is a creative that you want to inspire to believe in who they are.
That's right.
Tragedy. I lost my father on Thanksgiving, my brother on Christmas. We always say to my mom, just don't go on July 4th, please, right? Or Easter. But everybody has lost.
Of course.
So to simply, what that allows me to do is have, and I think anybody hopefully, I think what often happens is David Kessler, who wrote or helped Kubler-Ross write The 5 Stages of Grief. Mm-hmm. He went back to the family recently and he said, I think there's a 6th stage and I'd like to explore that. Would you let me do it? And they said, sure. And the 6th stage was finding meaning.
Oh, okay.
He lost his son. And so for him, he said, I needed to find meaning to be able to get to a point where I could feel inspired in my life again.
Of course.
And not just sit with grief.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
But Susan David said this recently, that grief is just love looking for a home. And I love that. So all of these things for me, like there's all of these life experiences that I pull on, and I think anybody that really wants to be inspirational to others, it's got to be authentic. You can't manufacture.
No, you can't.
You can, but it won't last for long.
And it's funny, that's a good segue for these other tips that I'll share. The characteristics of people that have the ability to share are, for example, being humble, genuine. Authentic would certainly fit into that same category. Friendly, and possess an ease of interacting with the majority of people they encounter. Yes. In addition to that, having a positive impact on others to potentially do the right thing, because we know that sometimes people don't have the right people surrounding them to help them with guiding them to make those good decisions. Oftentimes they might be on their own, or maybe even the people guiding them, just again, back to my earlier point, have good intentions but aren't guiding them the right way. And then factor in the inspiration delivery method. It could be something like this. It could be through Clubhouse. It could be through writing. It could be through any number of combinations of formats, and figure out which one is the most comfortable for you, because to your point, you need to have it be authentic.
Yes.
If I wasn't comfortable doing this, if you weren't comfortable doing this, we couldn't be here right now. So this works for us. I don't recommend this for everybody. It can be a little nerve-wracking for people. You thought today we weren't going to be in the studio like this. You thought this was going to be audio only. So kudos to you, Tom, for right, exactly. I said, oh no, come on, we're going to the studio. So high five on that one. And then not everyone who is inspirational is an extrovert. I think that some people think, oh, only extroverts can have that special skill of inspiring people. No, that's absolutely not the case. In fact, I'm sure you've met many people like I have who they get up on stage, they speak, you talk to them afterwards, and I've worked with some of these people like you have, and you think, wait a minute, was that the same person up there that I'm talking to now?
That's right.
A lot of times that's absolutely not the case. So if you're an introvert, I tell people just to try to get comfortable with that sense of, if you feel like you can inspire people and it's just going to take every ounce of courage to get up there or to inspire people in whatever method you choose, please do so. We need more people like that.
I talk in a room and I'm not an introvert, but I talk in a room on Clubhouse that is for introverts.
Oh, okay.
And it's about exactly this. It's about finding your voice as an introvert. And one of the things I often say to people is, we create overwhelming stories for ourselves.
Yes.
That don't have to exist. So if you, for example, if you have to get up in front of a crowd and have a conversation and you feel that it's just not you.
Right.
Find 3 or 4 people in that crowd that you're going to pivot to make it seem like you're looking around, right?
Right.
So now, if it's 1,000 people, it's just 4.
That's right.
You just brought it down to 4 people.
That's right.
Don't give a speech, tell a story.
Yes, and there's a very big difference between those two subjects. We could do an entire show on that.
Yeah, just bring yourself into it.
Bring you back to talk about that sometime.
But when you bring yourself into things, I think that's when people start to sense that authenticity, and that's when they can be inspired. Whether or not you're this big, walk into the room and everybody knows you're there.
Right.
Or the person who walks into the room and kind of mouses in a little bit.
That's right.
I don't think either means that you can't inspire.
No, not whatsoever. And as long as, going back to your point about the story, it really is a fairly simple format.
Yeah.
There's a beginning, middle, and end.
Right.
You don't have to make it overcomplicated.
And everything doesn't. You don't have to regurgitate the entire everything in your life right away, right? So
not at all. I mean, in fact, it's probably more interesting if you leave some of the elements out. In fact, you were telling the story earlier before we came on about how you were testing your daughter in terms of communicating with her through text by not fully giving her any real words to work with, just to kind of prove a point. And I thought that was clever in terms of what you're trying to do there.
I think you choose, I remember I worked with, I had somebody that worked for me who was incredibly competent, and they were very good at what they do, but they didn't believe it. And so what they would do is they would ask questions all day long. Just ask questions. Now, question asking is always healthy, but this was at the
Extreme.
point where I knew this person knew the answers.
Right.
So one of the things I did, and it might seem a bit odd, and I remember my leader at the time thought it was a bit odd, but it ended up working, is I stopped answering his email.
Oh.
Now, I read it.
Okay.
If it was really urgent, of course, we'd lean in. And he got frustrated by that, but what we found over time is that he started to answer his own questions.
Oh, okay.
And I remember that at that time, and I'll just say this quickly, he didn't communicate well with one of the other workers, and they just couldn't mesh. So I brought them into a room and I showed them Brene Brown's vulnerability speech.
I just shared that the other day.
And they both came to me afterwards and said, "You've changed our lives." And it completely altered the way that they spoke to each other. It completely altered the way they dealt with our customers and dealt with me. These are the things that I think the best, most inspirational people are really going to be folks that they don't just hear you, they listen deeply.
That's right. And I think that's a great place for us to leave off today, is with that message that you just stated. It couldn't be more eloquently stated, so I will leave it at that.
Great.
And thank you for being here today.
Thank you for letting me be here.
Magical for me.
Lovely to see you again and be here.
Likewise.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. And everybody, thank you for being here today. Please stop back and check us out with more Murf+E Unfiltered Zero BS Biz Talk stories that we have coming your way. Take care, everyone. Thank you.